There's something that genuinely drives me crazy, and once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Because I keep watching people pour money into the stock market like they're feeding quarters into a slot machine, hoping something magical happens, while a credit card balance charging over 20% interest is sitting right there, quietly draining them every single month. And it's like trying to fill a bucket with massive holes in the bottom and then wondering why you're not getting anywhere. Because no matter how much effort you put in, the structure guarantees failure. I've spent an unhealthy amount of time thinking about money, not just investing, but the order in which financial decisions actually work in real life. And what I've noticed is that most people aren't bad with money. They're just doing things in the wrong sequence. And if you want to build wealth instead of constantly feeling behind, the order matters far more than the specific investments you pick. Here's a stat that should immediately slow you down. Because according to the most recent Federal Reserve and Consumer Finance surveys, roughly 1 in 3 Americans has no dedicated emergency savings at all. And the median emergency fund sits around $500, which is less than many monthly car payments, less than a single medical bill, and barely enough to cover a minor car repair. Yet these same people are asking whether they should buy individual stocks, trade options, or invest in crypto, which is like asking whether you should buy a Ferrari when your current car can't even make it through the next oil change without breaking down. And the issue isn't ambition, it's order. There is an optimal sequence for investing your money that can quietly save you tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, reduce stress, and dramatically increase the odds that you actually stick with your plan. But most people ignore this sequence because it's boring, unsexy, and doesn't produce exciting screenshots, even though boring is exactly what works. Before we talk about where to invest, we have to talk about what happens when the order is wrong. Because you wouldn't start building a house by choosing marble countertops if the foundation was cracked and the roof leaked. Yet financially, that's exactly what people do when they chase the latest ETF or hot stock, while high-interest debt quietly eats every potential gain. The opportunity cost here is enormous because every month you carry credit card debt charging over 20% interest is a month that debt grows faster than almost any realistic investment return. Every paycheck where you skip your employer's matching contribution is free money you're refusing to pick up. And every dollar invested in a taxable account before using tax advantage options is a dollar you voluntarily hand to the IRS. Step 1. Before you invest a single dollar anywhere is an emergency fund. Not because it sounds responsible, but because it changes how your brain behaves under stress. Since an emergency fund isn't just money for unexpected expenses, it's psychological insulation that prevents panic decisions. When life inevitably happens because without a buffer, a car repair or medical bill forces you into bad choices, like selling investments at the worst possible time or adding high-interest debt, while with even a small buffer, the same event becomes an inconvenience instead of a crisis. The classic advice says 3 to 6 months of expenses, but what actually works is progression. Starting with your first $1,000 as fast as possible, then building to 1 month, then 3 months, because each milestone changes how you think and act. And behavioral finance research consistently shows that even modest cash reserves dramatically improve decision-making by signaling to your nervous system that you're not one mistake away from disaster. Once that foundation exists, the next step is non-negotiable, which is eliminating high-interest debt before serious investing. Because paying off a 20+% credit card is the equivalent of earning a guaranteed risk-free return that beats almost every professional investor in history. And carrying that debt while investing is like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks. There is one critical exception, and that's employer matching. Because if your employer offers a match, you contribute enough to capture it even before debt is fully gone, since a match is an instant guaranteed return no market can offer, after which you redirect everything else back to debt elimination. But this is where I need to slow down and be honest in the first person, because I didn't learn this sequence from textbooks or spreadsheets, I learned it from discomfort. There was a night that still sticks with me, not because anything dramatic happened, but because nothing did. It was just after midnight. My apartment was quiet, the city outside had gone still, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at a single number I had avoided calculating for years. It wasn't my income, it wasn't my net worth, it was the number of days I could survive if my paycheck stopped. I remember typing it into a notes app, slowly listing rent, utilities, food, insurance, the basics, almost hoping I'd made a mistake, and when I finished the answer was 21 days, 3 weeks. What surprised me wasn't panic, it was shame, a quiet, heavy embarrassment that settled in my chest. Because from the outside, I looked responsible. I talked confidently about money. I gave advice. But in that moment, I realized my sense of security was borrowed. It existed only as long as nothing went wrong. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was spiraling, but because I couldn't unsee it. Every future decision suddenly felt fragile. Every yes at work felt less like choice and more like compliance. And that's when I understood something most people never articulate. Fear doesn't just make you anxious, it quietly removes your ability to choose. That night didn't make me rich, but it made me honest. And honesty is where financial calm actually begins. It rewired how I thought about money, not as growth or status or beating the market, but as insulation against panic. And that perspective matters even more now, because the environment has changed. In 2026, we're living with higher interest rates, persistent volatility, normalized layoffs, and thinner job security, even for high performers. And in this environment, the biggest financial risk isn't missing out, it's overreacting. This is why the smartest playbook right now is intentionally boring, deliberately unsexy, and aggressively anti-hype. No all-in moves, because concentration increases fragility when volatility is high. No leverage, because leverage removes time, and time is the most valuable asset you have when income is uncertain. No complex strategies that require constant attention, because attention is a limited resource when stress is high. Instead, the structure stays simple and defensive. Liquidity first, so surprises don't become negotiations with fear. Debt elimination second, especially anything above 8 to 10%, because high interest drag destroys flexibility. Guaranteed returns next, like employer matches, because certainty matters more than upside in unstable periods. Only after that do you invest automatically, diversified, low-cost, boring by design, not to beat the market, not to feel smart, but to build distance between your daily life and financial anxiety. This isn't about maximizing returns, it's about minimizing regret, because in a high-rate, high-volatility world, durability beats brilliance every single time. When you operate this way, something subtle but powerful happens that no spreadsheet can capture. Your nervous system calms down. You stop checking balances compulsively. You stop reacting emotionally to headlines. You stop feeling like every market move is a personal judgment of your intelligence. Money becomes background infrastructure instead of a daily negotiation with anxiety. And that's when progress actually accelerates. Not because you're chasing harder, but because you're no longer sabotaging yourself under stress. And this is where the ending really matters. Because wealth in 2026 isn't about appearances. It isn't cars, houses, or optics. It's walking away money. The ability to pause without panic, to refuse without fear, to choose slowly instead of being rushed, to absorb shocks without your identity collapsing. It's psychological safety. It's knowing that if tomorrow went wrong, you wouldn't have to beg, rush, or accept terms that violate your dignity just to survive. That safety changes how you negotiate, how you invest, how you sleep, how you breathe, how you show up in relationships, because the system profits from urgency and insecurity, but it cannot extract value from someone who is calm, patient, and structurally insulated. Most people will understand this intellectually and still return to old patterns out of habit, because habits feel safer than change, but you don't have to. Do the boring steps first. Protect order over excitement. It won't earn applause, it won't make great screenshots, and no one will clap for your emergency fund, but it will earn something far more valuable: time, options, resilience, and peace. And that is the kind of wealth that actually lasts going into 2026 and beyond. I want to pause here and speak directly to you for a moment. Not as an expert, not as a commentator, but as someone who has felt the same quiet pressure, or sitting behind the eyes while pretending everything is fine. If you are listening to this and feeling a small tightening in your chest, that is not weakness, it is recognition. Money stress isolates people because it convinces them they are uniquely failing, when in reality, millions are carrying the same invisible weight in silence. The reason this sequence works is not because it is clever, but because it reduces cognitive load. It removes dozens of daily micro-decisions that slowly drain your emotional energy. When your basics are covered and your risks are controlled, your mind gets space back. That space shows up as better sleep, calmer conversations, and the ability to think past next month without panic. This is also why I ask you to stay until the end of videos like this, not for engagement metrics, but because repetition matters. Financial calm is built by hearing the same simple truths often enough that they finally override the noise. If this resonated, do one small thing after this ends. Write down the next boring step in your own order. Not all of them, just the next one. Then come back to this channel when doubt creeps in, because it will. Progress does not come from motivation spikes, it comes from quiet consistency reinforced over time, and you deserve a financial life that supports your dignity, not one that constantly tests it. Stay with that thought. Let it settle. You do not need to overhaul your life tonight. You need alignment, not acceleration. Save this video, return when headlines get loud, and use it as a reminder that calm beats clever. If this helped, subscribe so this becomes part of your environment, not another burst of inspiration. And if you know someone carrying this stress quietly, share it. Sometimes the most valuable investment is letting someone feel less alone. That is how trust compounds, slowly, steadily, without hype, fear, or pressure. Thanks for watching.